we don't, in our schools, teach about the future. We don't help young people think about what we mean by the future.
As investment leaders at Pictet, we adopt a long-term view and take our responsibilities to both current and future generations very seriously. In this series, we invite thought leaders, entrepreneurs, scholars, and innovators to share ideas set to shape the world in the years to come. My name is Stephen Barber, and I'm founder and chairman of the Pre-Pictet Photography Prize and a former group head of communications here at the Pictet Group. Today, we'll discuss the potential future of humanity and our relationship to the planet. We are joined today by Professor David Christian, pioneer of the study of world history on very large scales, or big history as it's known, and most recently the author of Future Stories, a user's guide to the future. He is also founding president of the International Big History Association and co-founder with Bill Gates of the Big History Project. Reading your latest book, Future Stories, I mean, I at times my head was spinning trying to grasp some of the ideas that you express in there. I mean, first of all, the very notion of what is the future, this point between the past and the future, and what is its nature, and even you explore somewhat the nature of time and these two ideas of time being like a flow and time being maybe like a map, time having a direction or time having no direction or being cyclical. Tell me something about how you see the present and that division between past and future.
Yeah, when I took on this project of trying to write a book about the future and what we mean by the future and how we cope with it, I did it partly because I thought I'd sort of told a story about the past, and now it would be interesting to tell a story about the rest of time. But the other reason was because I realized that I'm a professional historian. I spend a lot of time thinking about the past, but we don't, in our schools, teach about the future. We don't help young people think about what we mean by the future. And yet, as one of the great futurologists put it, that's where we're going to live the rest of our lives. So having some grip on ideas about the future, even if those ideas are kind of messy and complicated and contradictory, I thought would be helpful. So I tried to put together ideas about the future in a sort of handbook. And I had to begin, of course, by asking what we mean by the future. And I eventually realized that modern science is pretty deeply committed, not all scientists, but is pretty deeply committed to the idea that the future really is open to a certain extent. You know, there are powerful general rules, but the details of the future, and details which may really matter to you and me, are actually open. And I think it's quantum physics that first forced many scientists to think of the future of reality itself as unpredictable, as probabilistic, as having this sort of random element. If that's true, then choices are real, morality is real, and thinking about the future is worth doing.
It would be pretty depressing if we were to, I mean, the idea of, if you like, the strong form of determinism in which the universe, everything in the universe, the interactions and the causations between atoms and so on, just determines everything that happens, and that our brains are just following a mechanical path in the same way. That would be very depressing, because it would mean that we couldn't influence what we see is happening out there. That, as you say, that maybe the evolution of quantum physics has really put to bed that that theory?
I think from the time of Newton, really, until the late 19th century, most scientists were inclined to think that the universe really was deterministic. That the feeling that the universe is open was a sort of illusion, because we could never hope to have enough information to really predict the future, but actually it was predetermined. So that was a real sea change in scientific thinking. And I agree. It depresses me, the thought that everything is locked up, and I think it creates a sort of, this is putting it romantically, but it creates a sort of beauty about lives, and it gives them a significance that they would not have otherwise, I think. So it's a very, very important distinction between the idea of a deterministic and a non-deterministic universe. And if we live in a non-deterministic universe, then we have to start thinking, okay, how do I deal with the future? And that's where we can begin to sort of form or tease out some of the rules that we use instinctively in our daily life to deal with the future, and all living organisms use. In a sense, what I was trying to do was tease out the basic rules about preparing for the future. And there are basic rules that not just humans, but all animals, indeed bacteria. As you know, there's a whole chapter about how E. coli prepare for the future. What are the rules of thinking about the future? And I think actually they're very simple indeed. I mean, the first one is, if we accept the indeterminacy of modern science, then we really have no evidence about the future itself. There's no evidence coming from the future. The historian Collingwood said, we shouldn't bother thinking about the future because we have no documents from the future. And he was absolutely right. So we have no evidence from the future. But what we do have is the knowledge that in the past, in some domains of reality, there were regularities. So this business of distinguishing between different domains of reality, those in which there are regular processes that we can plausibly project into the future. So, for example, the sun rises every morning. I'm willing to put a lot of money on the fact that it will rise tomorrow. So there are things we can predict, not because we have documents from the future, but because we are so certain that in the past, this has always happened. These things have always happened. There are other domains in which you can't predict. So on an issue like climate change, for example, it means climate scientists can tell us that if we keep pumping carbon dioxide into the atmosphere, we can project with quite a lot of confidence what the temperature, the global temperatures will be. What we cannot predict with any confidence is whether humans will actually do the things necessary to ensure a good climate future. So when you're predicting the future, whether you're an E. coli bacterium or you're a modern weather forecaster, what you're doing is you're looking at regular trends in the past and seeing how much you can build on them with how much confidence.
I mean, I'd like to come back to this subject of climate change, because that's possibly the greatest challenge that faces humanity, the future of humanity on the planet. And this is something that we understand pretty well, the science, as you said, the causation behind climate change and the possible potential consequences. And we're very likely seeing the evidence of that today. I mean, in America, I read today, Washington, D.C. is sweating in sort of 90 degrees Fahrenheit or 32 degrees centigrade, whilst there are snowstorms a couple of hundred miles away. It's extraordinary. Now, so we see what's happening. We have the ability to act, but how do we do that?
We can never rule out scenarios in which we don't come to terms with global warming, and in which in 3 generations' time, the world is all the sort of things that make the world at the moment so comfortable for so many people will no longer be possible. That future, the next 100 years, is I think the one that's most emotionally engaging. I have 3 grandchildren, and what I know is that there's a good chance that they will live into that future. If the legacy my generation leaves behind is awful, they will know who to blame, and that is terrifying. So those are the bad scenarios. We can never forget them. I came out of this book more of an optimist than when I went in. The past trend over the whole of human history is that humans keep spinning new ideas about how to manage their environments. So if we discover we have a new problem now about climate change, we should expect solutions to turn up. And the other issue is collaboration, which you mentioned. Despite the many battles and conflicts that are going on in the world, and the conflicts over identities, over cultures, over religions, despite that, we're a profoundly collaborative species. And again, that is a deep trend in human history. It goes back to the beginning of human history. And now the networks are global. They used to be local, they're now global. That's an absolutely astonishing thing. So the tools for collaboration on a global scale now exist. And I think the crucial thing probably is finding the ways of thinking that will help motivate people to see themselves as part of a global network, not as members of, well, I mean, they will always carry on seeing themselves as members of nations or particular religions and so on, but can people learn to see themselves also as citizens of humanity? Because we're now a global species, and we cannot solve issues like global warming or the threat of nuclear war nation by nation. It's a project that will require collaboration at a global scale. People can collaborate in huge communities of millions of people, most of whom they will never meet or never know. They can sacrifice their lives for those communities. So this is not utopian. It's an educational project to help people see themselves as members of a global species.